Hey there, troops. This is Jeff Evely, Op Sergeant Major with Veterans for Freedom. I'm back with you now for the second time today on the 29th of August, 2022, because we have some breaking news coming out of Alberta. It seems that perhaps there was more than met the eye with the Chrystia Freeland trip to Alberta, which is often the case with the current regime. So we brought on a couple of special guests here tonight that can give us a little bit more on the Alberta perspective and what this decision is going to mean. So we'll get into a couple of things with them. And we also have our V4F intelligence officer, Tom Quiggin, back with us tonight, and he's going to be providing us with some of the up-to-date intelligence analysis around this issue right now. But I thought I would start us off with just a quick background to what the state media is putting out there right now. So everything in the news cycle is about this guy who accosted Minister Freeland as she was getting on an elevator in Alberta. And I'm just going to show you global news here. Oh, she's got no sound.
Trend of harassment against politicians in Canada and against women and racialized communities following a tirade of verbal abuse leveled at Chrystia Freeland while the Deputy Prime Minister visited her home province of Alberta on Friday.
As leaders, we need to call this out and take a united stance against it, because no matter who you are, who you love, the color of your skin, how you pray, where you're from, your gender, you deserve respect, and you deserve to live in peace without fear of threats or violence.
Now, police say they are aware of this widely circulated video of the attack, which shows a man walking towards Freeland while she was waiting in the lobby of the Grand Prairie City Hall, then yelling profanities at her and calling Freeland a traitor. Now, Chrystia Freeland is from Peace River in Alberta and said in a statement, "What happened was wrong. Nobody anywhere should have to put up with threats and intimidation."
Okay, so that's what they're saying on this. And there's another angle here, though, that I just wanted to show, because there are two cell phone cameras. And this is the other one as she's getting on the elevator here. And well, this is while he's yelling at her. I don't know. She doesn't seem to me like she looks like she's very intimidated. Matter of fact, she looks like she's kind of enjoying herself. But that's just me. Now, for everything that seems to be coming out up to the moment on this with respect to the true intentions of this visit, I'm going to hand this over to Tom Quiggin. And Tom, you go ahead and fill us in on all the intelligence around this for now.
Okay, thanks, Jeff. This is an interesting story, a breaking story, and I think we've actually got a bit of a national scoop here. I had kind of passively wondered, I didn't do anything, but I wondered, like, what was the Deputy Prime Minister and the Finance Minister doing in Grand Prairie, Alberta on a Friday at the end of August, at the end of the summer? There was no announcement made. It wasn't explained why she was there. And as it turns out, the individual who accused her of being a traitor might actually be onto something here. What it appears she was doing there is she is involved in a new, I guess we'll call it an environmental project. And it looks like they want to expand the Caribou Reserve that's just south of Grand Prairie. And they want to expand it by about 4 times the size. And because this new massive chunk of territory will become a federal reserve, a Caribou Reserve, if you prefer, there will be a whole series of environmental laws that will have to be followed by everybody involved. So it doesn't matter whether you're farming, fishing, an oil driller, building a highway, building a new house, or whatever, you're going to come under new federal laws. And apparently, what we're being told is if these folks do not fall into line by the end of December 2022, then the feds will just basically take over the area, and you won't be able to do anything inside that reserve area without getting first a federal permit. So that's kind of the overview. So we're going to turn over the show now to Sam, perhaps not his real name for what might be obvious reasons, but Sam understands what's going on here. So we're going to let him explain what's going on in some detail. And then we're going to come back and look at environmental and social governance. We're going to look at stakeholder capitalism. We're going to look at the World Economic Forum. And I think what we're seeing here is the thin end of the wedge, where Chrystia Freeland wants to kneecap Alberta's oil fields. Sam, over to you.
Thanks, Tom. Thanks for having me on, guys. Thanks a lot, Jeff.
My pleasure.
Yeah, I just kind of heard about this recently through the grapevine, or however you want to say it. The expansion of the Caribou zone basically covers everything from underneath Grand Prairie all the way down past Grand Cache to the border. And inside that, there right now, what we're doing to try and alleviate or come up with a proposed protection plan for the Alberta regulator in this scenario to present to the federal government so they can okay it and we can continue activity if they do okay it by December 2022. If they don't okay it, which I can't really see, we all kind of know which way the wind blows with the federal government.
Mm-hmm.
They do have the ability to throw down a protection order and make it so there can be no expansion of any industry inside that zone. So you can't build new roads, you can't build new leases, you can't do anything. So you're basically end up at the whim of the federal government. And this, you're right, it goes towards all coal, mining, forestry, every industry that is in that zone has to try and fight for the right to even use it. And that's, I mean, they say there's 100 to 130 caribou maybe left in that zone, but they don't actually know. This is just hearsay by trackers they do have on some of them and sign. That's it.
And I have the image up on the screen here, Sam. It looks like the legend here says Upper Smoky subregion, and that's all outlined in red. It includes basically everything south of Grand Prairie and Beaver Lodge, is it? Basically everything south following the Manitoba border, all the way to the south here. So it's a pretty big chunk of land. It's hard to see, I think, for folks that might be viewing it on the screen, but they do have this this drawing down here in the bottom left. There's a good image of the province itself and where the zone is relative to the rest of the province. That's a pretty enormous swath of land. Like, Alberta is huge. This is any idea how big that is? I mean, to me, it just looks like Prince Edward Island size.
Well, I tried to count the sections in it. There's a lot. So,
yeah,
the blue outline that you do see on there, Jeff, is the old Caribou zone.
Mm-hmm.
And then the red, you're exactly right, is the expanded Caribou zone, which would house all of it.
Right.
And it just so happens to go around every oil and gas road out there and forestry. So,
yeah, no kidding. Yeah.
Tell me you're trying to destroy us without, telling me you're trying to destroy us.
Well, and that's kind of the question that we're left asking. I said in the description for the show notes here, if we had a malevolent regime who were trying to cripple us and destroy us as a country, without necessarily anyone knowing, or trying to avoid having anyone know what they were doing, what would they be doing differently at this point?
Yeah, exactly. Well, and another fact too is that the main artery, the main highway, Highway 40, is actually in that zone as well.
And what's the plan for that?
Well, that's the thing, right?
Right. So that would be an existing highway, I guess, but there'd be no new highway development. I mean, I'm just guessing that would be probably the tack that they take. And if anybody's having trouble really seeing these boundaries, I'm just kind of going over it with my mouse. This is the blue line here where the old reserve was. So that's kind of the outer edge of it right there. And it's not even half of the territory, I think, that is outlined by the red. So this is pretty much a doubling of the protected land mass over which I guess Albertans are not allowed to work at this point. So this is pretty serious. But do you have any idea as to what kind of oil and gas resources might be at stake here in terms of number of wells or anything like that?
Lots.
Lots.
I'm just gonna there's massive amount of reserves in that area.
Yeah.
So
yeah, and you guys have already lost, too many jobs and too many lives. I would say there's a good statistic that I often reference from the United States, where I think it's a 2% drop in unemployment represents about about 40,000 deaths in the U.S. And while our population is not as large, we can expect something like a proportional fallout here in Canada. And I know Albertans have really been struggling already, and there's an opioid crisis underway, and there's a suicide epidemic that's currently in progress. And so folks out there, I'm sure, are already hurting, and this is really kind of kicking them when they're down. And so Western alienation, I think, is kind of the term of the day here. It really seems like they're driving that wedge right into the border of Alberta there, and it's just come under attack under these basically economic sanctions, without calling them that. Tom, did you want to jump in on that? Go ahead.
I'm just going to say, Jeff, there's so many different aspects to this story. It's almost difficult to wrap your head around. One is this whole idea of environment and social governance. ESG is what it's being called, green investing. And of course, we've seen what's just happened in Europe. They've gone down the ESG path for the last 10 years, and now they're getting killed because they wound up totally dependent on Russia. They got rid of their nukes. They got rid of their own natural gas to a certain degree. They got rid of coal, and now they are totally dependent on external sources for energy, one of which was going to be Canada, but we turned them down. I think what we're seeing, this is a continuation of that policy, that what will be important to the federal government in control of these reserve areas, and I'll be curious to see if they expand into more, whether it's just this Caribou reserve or if they're going to keep going to other ones. But they're going to say, it's about the environment, it's about governance, it's about social justice, whatever. And another term that Albertans probably already know, and if they don't, they should know it. It's called stakeholder capitalism. So we often accuse the World Economic Forum of having a socialist or communist orientation. And they always go, oh, no, we're not communists. We're not socialists. We believe in stakeholder capitalism. So shareholder capitalism, what we use right now, is the people who invest in a project are the ones that determine where it goes. With stakeholder capitalism, the company not only has to take into account their shareholders, they also have to take into account their customers, their own employees. They have to look at the shareholders and also the local community. In other words, if one person in the local community objects to the expansion of a project, then it has to go into another whole series of studies and environment and all this good stuff. And of course, the federal government will wind up being the arbitrator. In other words, yes, you'll be a capitalist company. Yes, you can invest, but we'll determine what you do, where you do it, how much you can charge, where you can work. In other words, it is socialism in the side door is what this is. Now, these terms, stakeholder capitalism, ESG, all this sort of stuff, this is World Economic Forum stuff. So if people are trying to say, well, why would Trudeau shoot Alberta in the foot? His father, Pierre Trudeau, had the National Energy Program, which is bad enough. This looks like it's multiple times worse. And the answer, of course, is ideology. Trudeau and many other people, including Chrystia Freeland, who incidentally is on the board of advisors of the World Economic Forum, believe that carbon-based energy needs to be stopped. They believe that only the elites and the rich and powerful should have access to it, and everybody else should essentially be eating bugs and driving bicycles. A little overstatement there, but you get the point. But I think this is where this is going. This is the ideology of the globalists being imposed on Canada's oil industry. And of course, Canada's oil industry is, mostly located in Alberta, a bit in Saskatchewan, a bit in Newfoundland. But, seriously, it's Alberta at the end of the day. So maybe, Jeff, we've got Dustin here. Dustin, maybe you want to jump in at this point and give us kind of a more granular sense of what do you think this is going to do to individual people, individual communities, individual towns? Because it strikes me that if the oil industry goes under, or even if it declines, it drags a whole lot of other stuff down with it. Dustin?
Hey, Tom, thanks for bringing me on, and thanks, Jeff, as well. Yeah, you're completely right. If they succeed in this endeavor, all of the communities that are going to be trapped inside that zone are just going to become ghost towns. You won't be able to sell because there's going to be no property value. There'll be no jobs to pay off debts. So you're going to be forced to either declare bankruptcy or even move into the towns paying off a debt that you no longer have anything to show for. As well, all of the subsidiary and supporting corporations and whatnot that are supporting oil and gas and all these different industries are going to completely lose all of their income in these zones. So if you really wanted to damage an economy, I couldn't think of a better way to do it. And to a point where it might not even recover.
Yeah, I mean, it takes hundreds of years to build these industries up, and just one election cycle to tear them all down. It's a real shame we don't have people that are a little more in touch with the way things work in reality, as opposed to going off this ideological template. And this has been going on for a while. I remember even like a few years ago, we had people throwing flaming debris on the railway tracks because they wanted to protest the Northern Gateway project there. At that time, the decision was made to bring in the what did they call them? The hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en tribe. So they actually went through this process of consultation with all of the reserves that were affected, and got everybody on board. Over a process that took up a couple of years, and once they had everybody on board, we had these protests kind of come out of nowhere, and now we're taking a completely different, more undemocratic approach to kill the project. And one has to wonder, how much of these protests and how much of this is just astroturfing. It could be, there was some tides money in there, and who knows where they get their money. It could be the government of Qatar or any other one of our oil competitors out there. Most salient at this moment probably being Russia, who has all of Europe dependent on them, and Europe we won't even give Europe our gas at this point. So it seems like we're doomed to kind of just keep feeding our enemies and feeding those monsters that are never going to leave us alone, when we could have ethical oil right here in Canada, and even energy independence for that matter. So the real, it just baffles the mind. And so with some of the remediation projects that we've seen out there as well, I just can't see why we can't have both. Everything I've seen up north seems to indicate that these remediation projects leave things kind of better than they were when we got there. There was a time where in maybe Fort Mac or a lot of these oil-rich places, the tar sands were actually a threat to wildlife, and that's not even the case anymore. But I just thought I'd maybe get your take on that kind of thing out there in Alberta, because you guys are so much more in the know of this than I am. I've never spent any time, working in the oil patch or anything like that. But as far as, where these oil companies are now relative to where they are even, 30 years ago, what kind of environmental impacts do we really see this kind of measure preventing in light of modern remediation technology? I'll throw that over to either one of you guys who wants to take it there, Sam or Dustin.
Well, all right. So in regards to the environmental standards that the oil and energy companies have adopted and actually pioneered due to fervent pushes from both the federal government and the population, a lot of the ecological standards that are set for operating industrial facilities are actually generated and piloted by our oil sands. They are
Yeah.
second to none.
Mhm.
So by saying that it's the environmental impact, it's actually like, what's going to happen to all these facilities when they're no longer profitable and abandoned? And you're worried about 100 caribou when you have all of those wellheads, all of those processing facilities that are left unmanned.
Right.
Yeah.
So with those facilities being shut down and left in a state of decay, are you saying that risk of contamination would come with that?
Well, when they're like, the wellheads are sealed off,
Yeah.
it's still fairly safe, right? Like, these oil and gas companies, they're very well versed in environmental impact, because that's one of the driving factors in a lot of what they do. But it's a lot of risk, because you're leaving these facilities unattended,
Mhm.
and all it takes is either an environment, like, think a tornado, a small earthquake, a wildfire, right? All these things, and you could just be compounded to such a degree. Like, I'll leave it actually to Sam to explain that a bit more. But yeah, like, the standards that have been set by the oil and gas industry are second to none, and the remediation process that they have is fantastic at the end of the day.
So sorry, Dustin, I got a couple of questions here that sort of pop up. One for Sam maybe, and one for you as a follow-on. The first one is, we're seeing this in this particular Caribou Reserve area south of Grand Prairie. And I'm wondering, is this the foot in the door? Or are we going to see this spread to other kinds of reserves or other kind of wildlife preserves, etc.? And the other thought I have in this, I did a tour in Alberta in 2018, and somebody originally from Manitoba, but who spent a lot of time in the Maritimes, I was kind of shocked at the degree to which people were truly angry. I don't mean just upset with Ottawa. I mean, everybody's upset with Ottawa, but I mean, they were really, viscerally angry with Ottawa, and they were talking separation, this and that. So, do you see this as a thin end of the wedge? Do you think it's going to spread to other areas? And do you see this as, basically, I hate to use the analogy, pouring fuel on a fire, but it looks to me like this is pouring fuel on the fire of Alberta separation.
Mhm.
Sam, maybe over to you for the first question about, is this the thin end of the wedge?
Yeah, we've already seen farther south past and over towards the Edmonton area there, where they've expanded, into the grizzly bear habitat. They've done the same thing there as what they're doing now with our caribou habitat currently south of Grand Prairie. So, and I'm not absolutely sure on it, but I think the timeline is the same, right? So, as industries, we have to come up and present, give all this information to the Alberta government, the regulator, to produce a protection act, or a protection plan for all these animals in the area, and they have to okay it, right, by the end of the month. And I can tell you right now, feeling it out with my, with land people and everything else, they don't think that's a realistic timeline at all. And I think that was by design, right? To try and come up and have all these people collaborate for a protection plan on this, to have the federal government okay it, it's just, the window's too small. But I think you hit the nail on the head, Tom. Like, we're getting into a scenario where, we're going to have more federal protected reserve land in this province than we do not. And that is all the control they kind of need.
So Dustin, from the point of view of people on the ground, folks who work for a living, people who travel up and down the roads, people who are either working in the oil patch or support the oil patch indirectly through their employment, what kind of message are you getting from people about Alberta separation, about anger, about potential violence, when we have the federal government coming into Alberta again, looking like, for purposes of a foreign ideology, they want to kneecap Alberta's, the oil industry? And let's not even get into the fertilizer thing and the cattle industry, but let's focus on the oil thing. Do you see this as creating more anger, more pressure for Alberta to go its own way? And do you think this will affect the upcoming leadership of the Conservative Party as well?
Well, Tom, the federal government especially in the last few years, it seems to want to constantly alienate the West more and more, even though the dependency on the West's income from its GDP and oil and gas is a linchpin for a lot of provinces. And the general disdain for the West is creating such a divide where I don't really see a scenario where there isn't an escalation wills, really. The general population has been more than done with Ottawa, the federal government, the Liberals' ideology, and whatever else is coming down the line. So you just keep poking everybody, and it makes you really wonder if maybe that's the intended purpose, is they want people to react and potentially overreact to fall into a narrative of maybe like a violent West or something like that. Separation, definitely on the table. It's always been there. The question is just the practicality and how to do it. And they're not giving Western Alberta or Western Canada in general a real reason to stay.
No, I think they're trying to give you every reason to leave, in fact. And I think it's terrible. I think that Justin Trudeau and his cohorts would be perfectly happy to continue lording over what's left of Canada in the east if the West were to separate. And basically, I've been seeing them kind of drive this divide for years. I mean, I've been an Easterner my entire life, and I can tell you that the East is very supportive of the oil patch because we rely on it for our own livelihoods, because out here in Nova Scotia, the provincial government won't let us work. They won't let us develop our own resources like the uranium and the offshore oil and gas that we have here. So we have to go to a province where we're allowed to work. And now they're making it harder and harder for you guys to work out there. So then where is the East supposed to go? And we have this constitutionally guaranteed transfer equalization payments that's just kind of been fleecing the West for quite a while. And, everything they're doing seems to be just kicking those provinces while they're down during a pandemic. And I'm showing Chrystia Freeland here again because I want to show that smirk one more time. We got a couple of comments in the chats about it, and it does seem to be that some of the folks in here with us also feel the same way, that this was maybe a provocative move to maybe get some kind of a reaction out of the grassroots out there. I think that I've been saying for a long time, I think they were really trying to push us to some kind of act of violence in January with the trucker convoy, and they cracked down basically expecting some kind of a violent reaction or to be able to find something in the convoy that they could pin on us. And when they didn't get it, they started scrambling and trying to defame everybody. And there's this, they have the Emergency Measures Act, and they're trying to tap dance around that hearing and everything now. So they really need that reaction right now so they can say, aha, you see, radical right-wing extremism. It's a real problem in Canada, and then they get to crack down on all of us. The entire movement and the internet and the whole shebang. So I certainly hope that cooler heads prevail out there. But if anybody has really been taking the brunt of this, it's those Albertans. And there is a kind of a real elitist component to this, where I can see Chrystia getting a lot of satisfaction out of her ability to just run roughshod over the folks that are a little lower on the social ladder than she is. Not that that's anything that she came into, through hard work. None of these people, I don't think, have ever been sore after a day's work in their entire lives. So that really does seem to be the divide, or the tactic. I'm sorry, it is to divide and conquer, and it is East and West, and certainly I'm one that hopes we can kind of pull things together in the freedom movement, at least, because I really think, like, if we lose the West, we're all going down. We're supposed to be a rich oil producing company with infrastructure to support all of that, including the roads and the railway, and now we've just kind of taken that whole way of life and trampled all over it. So I'm very empathetic, I guess, towards the frustrations that they have out there in Alberta. But I mean, what kind of a reaction do we expect to see? I mean, is there? Do we have do we know if the provincial government is necessarily going to stand hard against these measures, or has there been any kind of intimation from government out there in Alberta that they're going to be holding the line from here on out, or what is the word out there?
Well, I mean, the biggest thing is, our provincial government is obviously in a leadership race right now. There's some good talking, and there's people that I trust in that leadership race. I mean, there's one guy that I'll be voting for, Todd Bowen. He stood when he should have stood for what is right, and I know that when it boiled down to every decision, it'll be made for the people of this province. Now, whether or not it's going to make a difference, your guess is as good as mine. Yeah. I mean, I've been in this industry since I was 13 years old.
Right.
No word of a lie. Mm-hmm. So,
here's another thought, Sam. I did a little sort of back of the envelope work here, looking at where is the oil patch in Alberta, where are the reserves, et cetera, et cetera. It strikes me, and again, this is a generalization, back of the envelope stuff, that if they expand a few of these reserves outwards, the Caribou one, the Grizzly Bear one, and a couple of others, they could potentially be impacting at least 30% of the oil industry or more, depending how they go at this. And is there any discussion or anything you've heard about? I mean, people in Ontario tend to go, well, Alberta, who cares, whatever. But people in Ontario don't realize that the Alberta oil fields drives a lot of Ontario's industry. In other words, they need steel, they need acetylene gas, they need welding rods, they need trucks, they need huge amounts of industrial supplies in order to make the oil sands go, in order to make the pipelines work. Have you heard any reaction from the rest of the country on how badly it will hurt not just Alberta, but it's going to hurt everybody else as well? And it strikes me that if 30%, and that's a very broad number, if 30% of the industry in Alberta is crippled, the knock-on effects of that are going to be stunning in the rest of the country. Are you hearing anything at all on that sort of stuff, or is this are they even thinking about it?
Well, I think it's as far as call it brainwashing. I mean, look at how long they've been brainwashing people against oil and gas in our own country. There's so many people that don't even understand what a wellhead looks like, what a piece of pipe looks like, how the gas gets to their house, but they want to shut it off somehow. And I'm like, well, that's fine, but I don't think you understand anywhere close to the full scope of it or how clean that energy is. Mm-hmm. So, I have talked to a few people farther out east, and there is people, well, like Jeff said, over in Eastern Canada that come over here regularly to work, right? I've known lots of people in my lifetime that have come and go, and they seasonal work and stuff like that. And it's, some people get it, but not enough, obviously, Tom, because it's not widely spoken about, and I don't think a lot of people are on. I think more people are than we think. It's kind of like the freedom movement. If there is more people out there than you think, they're feeling the exact same way, right? And I mean, as in speaking towards the Alberta people and the people out west, I mean, the amount of restraint that people have shown in this country is just amazing. Because I talk to people on a regular basis, especially in the oil patch. If you thought truckers were bad, just shut the oil patch down for 5 months and find out what happens, right? Like, I know a couple pipeliners are haywire. So,
yeah, it's interesting. I think the potential for social unrest in Canada has been increasing over the last several years anyway. We're paying, I don't know what you guys are paying for gas right now. I had to pay $1.80 something today for high test unleaded for my bike. Price of eggs have more than doubled. Price of chicken is up massively. Price of flour is going up. And it strikes me that our own beloved federal government here in Ottawa has been using the politics of identity, the politics of division for the last several years to break Canada into a sort of series of warring parties, if you will. And they seem to be experts at turning people against each other. And I wonder at a certain point, if this isn't a bridge too far. In other words, Alberta's already upset. They're already suffering. They watched, I mean, we just had the Chancellor of Germany come to Canada, and he was basically begging Canada to try and ship natural gas to the state of Maine so it can be converted to LNG and sent overseas. He was begging Canada for assistance with energy. And what he got was a promise for Trudeau about future investment in hydrogen. Now, I'm not against hydrogen investment. It might even be a good idea. But what we need right now is actual real energy to help not just Canadians, but to also help our European allies and our American allies in order to stabilize our economies. And of course, Canada's a trading nation. If America goes down and Europe goes down, we're going down with them. So it just strikes me this is an incredibly dangerous kind of thing to undertake at the moment. And the only explanation I can possibly come up with is that Chrystia Freeland, who is, by the way, on the board of advisors for the World Economic Forum, is actually and fully committed to a globalist ideology, to use the excuse of climate change or global warming or global cooling, whatever they're calling it this week, as a way of restructuring our entire economy away from carbon-based energy and towards their sort of mythical, new sources of energy, which we've already seen are not working. So yeah, to me, it's this is something we need to come back to. I think maybe we should sort of pencil it in now that we should get together with Sam and Dustin again in a couple of weeks to sort of re-examine this issue and see how it plays out on the ground in Alberta and Ontario and Manitoba and Newfoundland and right across the country. As it becomes increasingly clear, our federal government is trying to kneecap our carbon-based energy system. So anyway, fascinating story, Sam. Thanks so much for coming on and providing some of the technical detail, and Dustin for providing some of the granular detail of what's actually happening on the ground.
Yeah, and I have this one other document that you gentlemen sent to me here, and this looks like a Q&A with perhaps Chrystia Freeland. I'll get some comments from one of you guys. You know what this is, right? You sent this in?
Yeah. So
Yeah.
all it was some information that I collected on the subject with a more involved member of our team, right? He's more in the land department, so that's just a list of question and answers kind of that I picked out of the conversation I had with him, because it's more involved.
Okay. I'll give this a read for the audience, and then maybe you can just give us the kind of quick explanation too. It says, sure. Do you know if there are do you know if they are doing this all over the province or just the Northwest? It is not all over the province. It is for the Narroway, Prairie Creek, and Red Rock areas within the Upper Smoky Regional Plan. The draft from Alberta is being put together with all the different users, coal, forestry, mining, oil and gas, etc. The important date is there with a commitment for Alberta to have an approved caribou management plan in place by the end of 2022. If Alberta does not have this plan in place, the federal government could step up with a protection order, which would essentially stop all new activity until such time that an approved plan can be established. In my view, a lot of stuff must happen in the next 4 months to keep this as a province issue. There are approximately 100 to 130 caribou left in the region. Say if all goes through, does that mean any of the applications for lease and roads for new activity would then have to go to a federal process, or would it stay provincial? It would stay provincial, but there would likely be strings attached. Example, reclamation to offset the new development. So that's kind of interesting. Do you want to take us through that there, Sam?
Yeah. So all he was doing was explaining the kind of the process or the effects that it was going to have on the industry in that area. And I mean, on point to the last comment there about the reclamation and the strings attached. I mean, It basically, well, that's fine. We'll let you put that road in, but you're going to reclaim this one for X amount of dollars, right? So that's a scenario that's kind of going on right now. They're wanting us to reclaim roads that we don't need, that are out there and when I say roads, I'm not talking about hard packed, even graveled. A lot of them. A lot of them are class 4, class 5 roads, which is winter access only or quad access only. Like it's not, you know what I mean? This isn't high grade stuff we're talking about. And you know, it's just another way for them to get their fingers in there and really grind the oil and gas, or you know, forestry or mining or coal companies to the point where, you know, we really have to look at the optics of it, or not the cost associated with doing anything.
And I mean, when you're talking about the reclamation of a road, usually like the environmental impact of a road would involve things like asphalt, you know, like actual petroleum products. From the sounds of things, like these are just rough roads that are basically well-driven paths. Is that about the size of it?
Yeah, that's about the size. Majority of them are the forestry roads. The main forestry roads are quite a bit better. It's I mean, we call it Chinese asphalt out here, but they just basically pack a bunch of dirt mixed with asphalt into it, and then that's the road. I mean, but the majority of them all are just gravel roads.
Right. So yeah, when we're talking about environmental impacts, like I'm tempted to say negligible.
Yeah, it's pretty negligible. I mean, depending on the width of the road, like your different classes have to do with the width of your road, your right of way, and stuff like that. You have to make them like a class 4 or 5 road is only a 10-meter wide access. Right. So,
and if they're basically just dirt and gravel, then the environment would essentially reclaim itself, given enough time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, a lot of these roads for sure. Yeah. They just don't want the pathways. Like we had somebody out here with the environment for the Caribou, and she was out here. They're actually, you know, spending millions of dollars to find these old survey trails that were used for seismic or whatever else, and replanting trees in them.
They're going to grow anyway.
Save the Caribou. I know. Don't tell me that. She was not, from the discussion that my friend had with her, she was not very much on board with what they were doing.
Yeah. It sounds like a make work project. And it sounds like it's more about optics than it is about impact to the environment. Yeah, I mean, it's a wedge issue. I don't see anything else going on here. There just doesn't really seem to be any need of this, especially at a time like this, when everybody's suffering and barely hanging on. So, yeah, I mean, this seems to be just entirely for the purpose of driving that wedge, for getting that backlash. Chrystia Freeland was looking quite smugly satisfied when she was getting told off getting in that elevator there, and I think that's probably because she got the soundbite she was looking for. And now they get to say that Albertans are somehow aggressive or violent, or that Canadian right-wing extremism is on the rise. But the fact of the matter is, you know, you can really only push people so far, and they just bully and they bully and they bully people until the point that they finally get a reaction. And then when they do, they say, oh, see, we were right about you all along. And they get to crack down on all of us. Yeah. Yeah, I mean, all I can say is that I hope people have their wits about them out there, and, you know, they're staying good and frosty, and cooler heads prevail. But with that, I think I'll just do the quick roundtable here before we wrap this up. Dustin, did you want to chime in here with any parting thoughts before we take off?
Yeah, sure. So just to build off what Sam was mentioning, so they say reclaiming these roads, these access roads to these facilities, is for the environmental impact, but what are the alternatives when you still have to manage that site, right? You're starting to think about things like helicopter rides to just do a quality control check on some remote site. And like, how much fuel does that use? How much maintenance, right? Like it's very obvious it's not what it is on the surface. And so centralization of control and power, pretty straightforward.
Sorry, I didn't catch that last part.
Oh, I was just mentioning that it just we're continuing to move forward with centralization of control and power.
Right. And that is a theme that we're seeing across the board too, even when it's coming to the cross-examination of, say, provincial health officers. They all seem to be coming back with, well, it's coming out of PMO. So the medical decisions that we once made as individuals are being made in the PMO, and I guess it's really no different when it comes to our oil and gas either. I'm having a hard time, distinguishing what we have now from serfdom, and the people in charge just kind of bossing the rest of us around all the time. It's quite fascist. So it's no wonder that people are reacting. Not that we endorse, that kind of yelling and cursing and stuff like that. With V4F, I don't think that's the right tack to take for obvious reasons, that they're going to use that to paint the rest of us as violent, and they are. But at the same time, it's like, well, what about this poor guy and what he's been through? And there just doesn't seem to be any sympathy for the folks a little lower down on the social ladder, And with that, Sam, did you want to jump in here and give us a few more thoughts on that before we go?
Yeah, I mean, as to the guy that yelled at Chrystia in the elevator, on the way to the elevator, from my understanding through the grapevine, he was going there to talk to somebody at city council about it, because he had heard about it. That was such a happen chance moment that she was right there. I think everything just boiled over for him, right? He had no intentions of doing that, but you can only poke a dog so much before it starts to bark. Right. And I feel for the guy. It's, but it's the sentiment. We're all trying to do this peaceful and, united to kind of try and get things straightened out. And, that's the path forward. We're not going to be the ones to throw the first punch.
Yeah, that's right. We can't be. It's just like I can remember saying in Ottawa, like if we give them anything to paint this movement as violent, we're going to lose this war on the first battle, because that's what they were really trying to do from the start. And it just seems like it's not just about the movement anymore. It's anybody that is anything less than ideologically homogeneous with the current regime. With that, I think I'll hand that over to our intelligence guy here to kind of the broad view before we sign off. Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, I agree with Sam. I think especially Ottawa lives in this bubble, and we still see here in Ottawa, even with the convoy, even with Rolling Thunder, everything else that's going on, they really don't get it that their policies destroy lives, they destroy families, they destroy businesses, they destroy trucking companies. People are suffering, and by suffering, I mean they're massively in debt, they're losing their jobs, their kids can't go to school, their kids can't go play hockey. And yet you get Chrystia Freeland and you get Justin Trudeau with their cute little smiles looking at you going, well, the problem is with Canadians because they're all racist and they're anti-science. Yeah. And it's like they are just so removed from reality that I'm not quite sure that they get it. Maybe some of them do, maybe they don't. But I do greatly fear that over the next few months, we're going to wind up seeing a lot more anger, a lot more social unrest. Folks are angry right now and they're running out of money. When we get into November, December, January, February, folks will be angry, they'll be running out of money, and they'll be cold, and they'll be hungry. And again, I don't know. I hope our government wakes up. I hope they redirect themselves, they get going to try and get things moving again, but I'm not really sure. Jeff, over to you for the final comment.
Yeah, somebody had thrown something up in the comments there that he says that was a staged event, right, Tom? It almost seems like it's a little too perfect, but I do believe in coincidences. I think maybe she just it was, the timing. That's all. It was very happenstance, and I don't know. I mean, I think if they were going to stage something like that to try to paint us all violent, then he would have actually threatened violence.
Yeah. The other thing is, has to be remembered, 6 or 7 years ago, when Trudeau went around the country, everybody was, oh, look at his hair. Oh, look at his socks. Isn't he so exciting? Isn't this so wonderful? over the last few months, every time Trudeau shows up somewhere, there's gaggles of people yelling and screaming and throwing things. So I think this is going to be an ongoing problem that any recognizable liberal who appears in public outside of Ottawa is going to have to get used to the idea that a good chunk of the country, and I mean way more than half the country, is angry. They're not violent yet, but they're moving in that direction. So yeah, interesting times ahead, as we always say, Jeff.
Well, they're already angry, and now they're going to make them desperate. So that's definitely a recipe for disaster and civilizational collapse, if I ever saw one. But gentlemen, Sam and Dustin, thanks so much for getting in touch and for coming out here to enlighten us all as to what's really going on the ground out there in Alberta. It seems no matter what the regime is doing these days, there's always more than meets the eye. So thanks a lot for filling in the details on it. And by all means, please let's do a follow up in a couple of weeks or whenever we have some new information, and we'll get it out there as soon as we can, guys.
Thanks a lot for having me on, guys. Keep fighting a good fight.
For sure. You too. Thanks, Dustin. Take care.
Thanks,
Tom.
guys.
All right. Thanks, Jeff.
Take care, buddy. Have a good night.